Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to day 6 of our JavaScript class. Yesterday we looked at we looked at DOM, like an introduction to DOM, and we played around with some DOM methods and kind of went through an overview of what DOM is and how to work with the DOM document object model to change the content on HTML documents, right? And towards the end of the class, we looked at events. Okay, so I am going to go over what we did yesterday a little bit slower. Then look at events. We're going to still look at events more in-depthly. Then I'm going to talk about Node.js, how to run or what Node.js is, and how to run your JavaScript code outside your web browser. Then I noticed I've been using the console a whole lot. Like most times, I just open up the console and just do some stuff. So I'm just going to show you guys how to just open up the console and do some basic stuff with the JavaScript developer tools, because you're going to need it in whatever development you're going to be doing, right? And we have, okay, I have some references, and I said I was going to be kind of doing some little exercises, right? So I am going to, if we have time, I'm going to try to put into practice all we've learned in some little exercise to see how most of all this stuff relates to, right? So prior to now, last week we learned all this stuff individually, right? We learned variables separately, operators and strings, data types, right? So when we start, like, we're going to look at two exercises that kind of combines everything. Then I am going to kind of share this document, and everyone is going to attempt. Please, can you kindly mute your mic if you're unmuted? Let me see. Yeah. So we're going to, if I have time, we're going to look at some exercises, some like kind of real life questions, and solve them, because it's going to help us see use cases of how to use maybe arrays and objects and functions with this method together, right? So with that being said, let's just go over what we have for today. Okay, so yeah, the DOM, right? We talked about the DOM. So yesterday I explained how we've been writing. Let me see. Just give me a minute. Can you guys see my editor, Grace? Can you see my code editor?
Yes,
yeah, we can see.
Yeah, thanks. So prior to yesterday, we've been writing JavaScript, and we've been writing variables and some little function stuff, and we'll be seeing them in the browser console. Okay, so just give me 1 minute. Okay, so we've been writing JavaScript code and we'll be seeing them in the browser console, right? So but yesterday, I introduced DOM and showed us how we could kind of use JavaScript to manipulate the HTML code directly, right? So I'm just going to go back to our document, right? So again, like we discussed, the document object model, the DOM, it's your HTML document, right? It's just your HTML document converted to a JavaScript object, exposing some methods and properties for you to manipulate and change the content, right? So when the web page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page, right? So it passes the page and creates a JavaScript object. And I'm sure we all know what objects are, right? So this is an example of a JavaScript object. I don't think I can declare document. So this is an example of a JavaScript object, right? Places in all your HTML tags and creates it as key value pairs for you to access them later, right? So the HTML DOM model is constructed as a tree of objects, right? So there's the document, we have the HTML. So long as your document or your index file, your HTML file has all these elements, the browser is going to pass them, create an object with them, and expose them to you in a document global variable. So we talked about the way we have keywords, functions. That is how we have web APIs or global variables provided in the browser space, right? So one is document. So with document object model, with the object model, JavaScript gets all the power it needs to create dynamic HTML, right? So this is one of the power of what gives JavaScript the power to play around with your HTML file. So we did some examples. I'm just going to go live so we can still play around and show some examples we did yesterday. I'll dispose that and click on go live again. Okay, so JavaScript can change all the elements in the web page, right? We tried this. So JavaScript can change all the attributes in the page, right? So I'm just going to test the first one. If I go to my documents and JavaScript and just do document.body.write, I could as well do document.write. So these are all methods, right? New content. So I said it yesterday, all these are methods and kind of properties on the document object, right? So there are a long list of them. Okay, new contents where it's, so I just added a new content, but it's supposed to override what we had previously, right? Let me see if this is a valid content and this is not valid. Why am I having? Okay, so let's just go ahead. I'm going to debug it when I get to examples. So JavaScript can change all the HTML elements in the page, can change attributes. We saw that yesterday if we do the set attribute, right? So if I maybe get document.get by ID, let me see what elements we have. Output, right? I can set attribute, right? So the set attribute method gives me the ability to maybe set an attribute. By attribute, I'm sure everyone knows what we mean when we say attribute, right? So this is an attribute, an ID is an attribute, a class is an attribute, then style is an attribute. Then we have other ones, like if we have the script, we have source. If I had an image tag here, this source is an attribute, the out is an attribute, right? So I can set attribute from JavaScript and give it a value, okay? So these are just basic, not really basics, one of the powerful stuffs JavaScript can do. JavaScript can change CSS and HTML element, right? So we've looked at all this. I'm just going to go to the next descriptive lesson, right? So HTML DOM methods, right? So whenever you hear about methods, right? We've used methods, we've been playing around. Whenever you hear about methods, right? They are actions that can be performed on objects, right? I give an example of array, and I'm going to use it again. So we have an array of numbers 2, 3. If we want to get the length of the array, we do array. That's if you practice your array methods, right? Array.length. It returns the length of the array. If I do array.push and maybe type in 2, I'm adding 2 to the end of this array. That's what the push command do. So all these are methods on the array data type, right? So methods are actions that can be performed on maybe different objects or different data types, right? So HTML DOM methods are actions you can perform on HTML element, right? So get elements by ID is just a method, right? I am going to, let me look for the DOM reference and just share right now so I don't forget again. HTML DOM object, no? Let me see. Because we just kind of have to be familiar with the most basic ones. Let me see. HTML DOM object so I can share it in the chat now. Okay, documents. So I'm just going to share this. So this is like the reference of all the HTML DOM methods, right? So you can just come around, click on document, event, objects. You can play around them by reference. I mean, whenever you see me do get element by ID, set attribute, right? You're going to see how all of them is used, and you're going to see a list of all of them, but just try to check out the most important ones. I'm just going to paste it in this chart. Okay, so let's just go ahead. So DOM HTML DOM methods are actions you can perform on HTML element, right? So DOM properties are values of HTML that you can set or change, right? So I can set an attribute. I changed a style like yesterday. So if I do dot style dot width, right? I can set a width or I can just give it a style directly, or style dot color. Yeah. So I'm going to give my examples, right? I'm just trying to go over it again. You can edit the style of an element directly from JavaScript, okay? So the HTML DOM can be accessed with JavaScript right in the DOM. All HTML elements are defined as object, right? So if you remember, it's only possible to kind of do something dot on an object or a data type, right? So for we to be able to do this on like HTML elements, we need to, or the HTML element needs to be converted to an object, but the browser has already done that for us. We don't need to create any object. If we're doing maybe a custom program, I always like to use user objects. I will have this, maybe have first name, last name, first name, then maybe a full name method, right? So, but the document object already has all the methods we need built into it, right? So the programming interface is the properties and methods of each object. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into examples. I'm trying to just breeze through so I'll get to events, right? The full example changes the content, the inner HTML of P element with ID of demo. So I think this is what we've been playing around with since last week, right? We introduced document.get elements by ID last week, not even yesterday, right? So I'm going to remove this. I have an element with H1. Let me just take this down and take out the class. We don't need it for now. With an ID of output, right? So the most basic way to manipulate a text or a HTML element is to call document.get elements by ID, right? So in the parentheses, you're going to pass the ID of the element. It's just trying to say, go to the document, my HTML file, get an element, but look for an element with an ID of passing the ID, right? Then this is another method on this element, right? So, like I said yesterday, you don't need to understand the inner workings, right? If you can just maybe get the syntax, be comfortable with syntax, you'll be able to do so much stuff, right? So this line of code changes whatever the inner text of this element is, so long it finds the element, right? If I save this and save this right now, I try to view the page, I'm going to see hello world instead of this is awesome, right? So this is just one of the basics, and we're going to use them in some practical examples today. So the get element by ID method, the inner HTML property, right? So the easiest way to get the content of an element is by using inner HTML property, right? So again, I can as well get the inner HTML rather than setting it, right? But just you can use this to set. I can also, if I want to save it in a variable, let me see if I can do this. Let me just check this out. Let value equals document.get blah blah blah, then the inner HTML. I'm going to console log the value. Okay, so let me just see what it outputs. Okay, it outputs the value, right? So as you can see, rather than setting it, previously we were doing document.getElement by ID.innerHTML equal to, I retrieve the value of, maybe if I'm trying to do a computation in my code, I just retrieve the value of the inner HTML in a variable and send it to the console, right? So I got this is awesome. So you can get the content of an HTML element and also set it right. Okay, let me just quickly go to the next chapter. So finding elements, these are easy to use methods to find elements, right? Get elements by tag name. This returns an array though. Get elements by class name. So it mustn't be just using get elements by ID, right? So if you practice all this, you will have seen the different behaviors, right? If I do get elements by class name, it's going to look for all the elements with a particular class name, right? Okay. Yeah, so changing element, right? So element.inner.html, the same thing we've been doing. If I undo this, okay, so maybe I'm doing this on one, and let me just do let's h1 element, so it to be more descriptive, equals document.get elements by ID output, right? So I have the, okay, this is not how to spell element, you just put an E. So I have a reference to the h1 element now, right? So if I want to change the text, I can just do h1 elements dot inner HTML equals whole, right? Or hello world, right? So I'm also necessarily do it on one line. I can retrieve the value of the element in a variable and play around with it later, right? So that's why it has element.inner HTML, elements.attributes, elements.style.property. I played around with style yesterday, right? So I can do element.style, not that, style.color. I can give it a color of red. So if I check out now, my text should be red, right? So these are just kind of ways you can manipulate your HTML documents with JavaScript. Yeah, adding and deleting element, right? So JavaScript doesn't not only has the power to manipulate, I can create an element in real time. Let's say, let's new element. I did this yesterday, equals document dot create elements. I'm going to create a p tag, right? Then I'm going to add text to the p tag. So let me generate a lorem text, right? So lorem is a dummy text we can use as placeholder. So if I generated that, I'm going to just come and say p dot either inner HTML, or let me just use text content equals dot text, right? Okay, move this. Okay. So I can basically, we can use the create element to create an element, append child to append an element, right? So as I've manipulated my p tag, I can just come here and just add it back to my document body, right? So I can just document the append child p, right? So let me see if this works. I don't know if that text content stuff will work. Reference p is not defined. Okay, so it's new elements dot text content. Where is p again? Yeah. Filter the keys append child, only one element. Okay, so it's documents dot body dot append child. Right, so I have my lorem exponent on my text on my web page. Again, so these are just kind of methods that allows you play around with text, right? I am going to try do one descriptive exercise to show you how you can use all this dynamically, right? So event handlers, I'm going to get to that at the end, right? So finding HTML objects. So this is just like a reference. We won't go into all the anchors, cookie, doc type, but again, like I said yesterday, you can get basically anything you want to get from a HTML file, right? So if I do, let's say console.log, let's see if I do console.log documents.scripts, right? I think this should console log all the scripts we have in our page, right? So I have to Do I have two scripts on the page? I have one. I just have one, right? So yeah, you can access the script. You can access the doc type. So if I do doc type, I'm going to get the doc type, right? It's HTML5. So with document object model, you can access basically everything. I can do document.head. I should be able to access documents.head, yeah, and I have all the elements in the head tag, so I can maybe, I think I've worked with this sometimes. I've dynamically appended a style sheet or a link in the head tag based on some conditions, right? So the DOM allows you to do all that. So we're not going to go into each and every one of these, right? So I'm going to click on next and go to the next lesson. So yeah, let me see. Okay, so this was the link I was talking about. I'm just going to share this in the chat. If you have, like, this was the link I was looking for. If you have time, you can just try go through these examples on this page, right? So I'm just going to go through it. Then I'm going to talk about HTML form and DOM forms, right? So finding elements in with the DOM, right? Often with JavaScript, you want to manipulate HTML elements. To do so, you have to find the element first. So we've seen get elements by ID. There is a get elements by tag name, class, selectors, and so on and so forth, right? So again, this is the most popular way to find, this is the most popular way to find an element, but most times you only have limited elements with an ID, right? So you can find HTML elements by tag name, right? So if I just click on try it yourself and try to use this example, right? I don't know if this is a little bit tiny, but so they have their scripts appended or embedded in their HTML file, right? Okay, I'm just going to copy this into my code editor so it to be clearer. Right? So const element equals document.get elements by tag name P. I don't have any P tags, so I'm just going to copy the two P tags here. Okay. Paste it. Then document.get element by ID demo. There is one P tag with the ID demo. I'm just trying to kind of get the example to work first. The inner HTML, then maybe dynamically put the inner. Let me see this. Sorry. Okay. So basically what this is trying to explain, right, it's document.get elements by tag name returns a list or an array, right? So if you can remember in our array lessons, how you access an array, let me say we had an array of cars back then. No, I didn't want to declare it. Let me just declare it. Let cars equals sub and so on and so forth, right? So how you access an element is via numbered index, right? So if you can see what they did here, they're trying to let us know that get element by tag name returns a list. So if I just show you that, if I comment this out and console log elements, it's going to return like a HTML collection, right? So it's called a HTML collection, and we can loop through it. So there's an index 0, index 1, and index 2. So this is how you get elements by tag name. You can get all the elements with the P tag, right? Then you can also do by class name, right? So you can do get elements by class name. So all these methods are listed on the first link I sent, right? You can get elements by class name, or better still, if you have the VS Code, your VS Code editor, you can just come and just click on, just type in documents and hit dots, right? It's going to give you all the methods you can play around with, and you can as well play around with them from here and maybe just Google what they mean, right? So get elements by tag name, right? Elements by ID. Excuse me. Let me just go back. I want to see more. Okay, there's add event listener. We're going to get to that, adopt node, and so on and so forth, right? So you can come here, play around with them, or you use the reference link I sent, right? CSS selectors. So I talked about query selector, right? So let me just kind of do a little explanation on it, right? So previously, we've just been doing document.getElements by ID, right? So let me just show you another powerful method on the DOM, right? So costs elements equals to document.query selector, right? So the query selector, it's similar to the get elements by ID. If I just duplicate this and type in get element by ID here, right? So these are the two of them close by, close to each other, right? So basically what get elements by ID does is I just have to pass the ID as a string, right? So I have an element, an ID, element with an ID of output. But with query selector, right? It doesn't know all. It's just a general finder, right? It's not by ID. So with query selector, you have to tell it what you're looking for, right? And if you can remember, remember in our CSS, for you to be able to, if you're trying to access a class, you use the dot, right? If you're trying to access an ID, you use the pound sign, right? So if I do pound sign output, I'm accessing an ID. So with query selector, if I want to access an ID, I'm going to do query selector ID output. Excuse me, if it's a class, I can do query selector dot the name of the class. So, but where query selector is a bit more powerful is I can find a tag, p tag. I can find a p tag with a class of class, but that's a little bit too complex for now. But what you should just know is query selector can accept more such parameters, right? You can use IDs, class, and maybe tag, right? So if I do this now, let me just say hashtag output and take this out. I console log elements, right? And check our console. I'm going to have our H1 with the ID of output. So that is just one of the finders. Okay. Yeah, so I share this link to this page. You can just go around and just come here and play around with all these examples and their exercises. So I'm just going to go to HDOM forms, right? I wasn't able to talk about this yesterday because I didn't talk about events. So if you remember, we handled or we treated forms in HTML. I think, I'm not sure we stressed or we spent too much time on it, but I know we did something on forms. So I can just maybe generate a dummy form right here. And it's important we learn how to use and maybe manipulate data from forms because we're going to be getting data values from form quite a lot. So I'm going to do form with one input, type of text, right? And just save this, right? So it's going to output a form like text input field in our web page, and I can type, maybe you can use it to collect user input, right? So like HTML form validation can be done by JavaScript, right? By form validation, it means getting this value. I can get this value. Okay, let me just create two form fields, right? I'm going to create input type text and I'll create input type number, right? Number. So the first, okay, let me break that. Okay, right? Sorry. Okay, the first one accepts text. So the second one just only accepts numbers, right? I can't type in text in here. So with what's it called? With DOM forms, right? Before I even go down, we can access or collect any value entered in our forms, right? So if you remember previously, we try to access values of elements with documents.query selector, get elements by ID. But please, if you're muted, can you just mute? If you're muted, if you're not speaking, just kindly mute. Thank you. Yeah, so previously, maybe if we are getting elements, we just get elements by ID and get the elements directly, right? So what if you have a form, you have a registration form and you want to get user input, right? And remember we said with DOM, JavaScript and the DOM, you can access any element on the web page, right? Yeah, so how this is done, you can assign these IDs, right? So let me just do typically what we've been doing. Remember, we've been doing get element by ID, get element by ID. Let me start with the easy one, right? I'm going to create an ID of, let's say this is, okay, let me make this form more descriptive, right? I'm going to put in label, first name. Okay, so this should break. Okay, first name. Then put in age, right? This should also break. So if I come back to my form, I should have a form field of first name and age, right? So let's say this is an application I'm trying to get user input, right? So we've seen previously that we can access elements with getting the id.inner.html, right? But inner HTML does not work for form fields, right? You have to get the value of the form field or the text content, right? So I'm just going to start with ID. There are a couple of ways to do it. So I'm just going to start what we're comfortable with ID. I'm just going to name this first name, right? So again, this is just plain old ID. I'm going to name this ID, no, not there, ID of age, right? So now we have IDs appended to our two input elements. If I go to my JavaScript now, let's say I'm going to get to event listeners. I'll say const first name equals document.get elements ID. How did I spell it? F name. Okay, so sorry about that. Document.get element by ID F name. And I'm going to just get the second field, const age, yeah, because document.get elements by ID age. So right, again, previously, for we to get text value or inner HTML of other HTML elements, be P, H1, we normally do what's it called? We use inner HTML, right? But when it comes to form fields, we use value, right? Value to get the text content, right? So if I refresh the page, if I try to console log this now, first name and maybe age, right? I'm going to get two empty strings. So let me just do this. So you see it's outputting something. The first name is, I'll concatenate my variable, right? Right, so you're going to see the first name is empty because I don't have any field on my first name, right? So that's where we're going to get to event listeners. For we to be able to get these two fields, we have to use events, right? So I'm just going to go to events. I'll leave this here. I'll come back to how we can get the form values, and I'm going to go to events, right? So basically, right, we use event listeners to kind of listen on forms, right? So if I go to DOM events, right, so this is where you can be able to play around with events based on the browser, right? So HTML DOM allows JavaScript to react to HTML events, right? So JavaScript can be executed when an event occurs, like when a user clicks on an HTML element, right? So I'm just going to pause here and try to simulate what we just read, right? So I have an input of first name, input of age. I can also add a button, right? So let me just say button. So I'm just trying to create a typical form, right? I'm going to name it submit. If I open my page, I'm going to see, okay, let me bring the submit button down. Just give me a moment. Okay, right. So I have my submit button down. So I have a typical form like we have in web pages, right? So I want to click on this submit button. Let's say a user fills this form. I want to get, so we are treating two topics here, right? How to get values from a form field and how to use event listeners, right? So again, what you should know is whatever I write here, okay, this is a good part to explain this. Even though I write 100 lines of code here, this JavaScript file gets run immediately this page it's loaded, right? So that's why you see the first name is because I am collecting the value of the first name. Immediately this page is loaded and let me just refresh this again. The field is empty, right? So I'm collecting the value of the first name directly when the page is loading and to just output the first name is empty. If I try to type here, it's not going to have any change because our JavaScript file is already loaded and it has run every code in it, right? So that's where event listeners come in, right? We can do cool stuff with event listeners. So if I let's just go over the syntax of how to set event listeners, right? So I kind of breezed through this yesterday, right? You can set on click directly on the HTML page, like append. This is an attribute, right? So the same way we had style, let's say previously in CSS, we saw that we had inline style, right? I can do style and start typing style here, like border 1 pixel, blah, blah, blah. Same way we have with JavaScript, right? There's an attribute you can use to write an inline JavaScript, right? So I can do on click, not really just one attribute, right? I can do on click, can play. So all these are JavaScript attributes, right? So I can do on click directly here. And whenever this element is clicked, so let me just do something. Let me see if I have access to console here. Okay, so this is going to throw an error. But basically, I can type in JavaScript directly on the HTML elements, but I don't want to do that for that example. So I'm going to go to the next way to, what's it called? To use event listeners, right? So I'm going to go to the add event listener section, right? So let me just go to JavaScript events up here. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, JavaScript events, right? Okay, does it have a separate section? JavaScript events. Okay, it was here and I skipped it, right? So this is what I was looking for right here. Yeah, so the add event listener method allows you to add many events to the same element, right? So this is what you want to be using most of the time, right? Remember, you can still add an event listener directly on the element, but if you want to have an effective or efficient code, you use the add event listener function, right? So this is the syntax, right? Element.add event listener click. So the most famous one is click, right? So I'm just going to go to my code and demonstrate what I mean by that. Remember, I'm trying to show you how to get element from a form field because we're going to build a little, we're going to like kind of work on 2 little exercises, right? So if I go back here, where is it? Forms. We're going to see this little stuff, right? So please input a number between 1 and 10, right? If I input 100 and click on submit, it's going to pull the value, compare it behind the scene, and return a response, right? So if I put in a number between 1 to 10, it's going to change to input OK, right? So for you to be able to build this kind of little interactive programs, you need to understand how to get data from the form fields and how to listen on events on the click of a button or click of an element, right? So if I just go back to event listeners, and so I don't want to go over all this one after the other. So first thing to do, like every other thing, is to add an accessor to our ID button, right? So I'm going to say button, the ID should be submit, right? If I go to my code I'm just going to do const button equals documents.get element by ID again, button, right? So if we can see this is just, okay, let me take out this value so we won't have anything confusing here right now. So if you can see this, I just accessed this element, the button element, the age input field, and the first name input field, right? So now I'm going to try to use this syntax, right? The add event listener method, right? So it attaches an event handler to the specified element. The add event listener method attaches an event handler to an element without overwriting existing event handlers, right? So let me just show an example of that before reading all those long stuff, right? So to add an event listener, right? If I just go here, not this page, if I go to event, if you can see this little stuff here, if I click on it, stuff changes. If I click on it, stuff also changes. Same way I can add an event or add maybe an action that will happen after I click on this button, right? So the syntax is button. Remember, we have a reference to that element here. So it mustn't be a button. So let me start with this. Let me just give an example of this element, right? This is awesome. I'm going to do const. Let me just comment this out. We'll come back to it in 1 second. I'm going to do const h1 element, right? Because output, right? So I have a reference to h1 element. I can do h1 element dot add event listener. So this is the syntax. I'm going to share a document that just explains this function, right? So I'm just going to easily console.log h1 elements dot inner HTML to the console, or let me just console.log hello. So I don't go too fast, right? So if I go here and click on this is awesome, even if it's not a button, it's just an element, right? So I'm going to see hello in the console, right? So basically you can just add listeners or maybe it's called event listeners, right? So when an action is performed, it must necessarily be on click of a button, you're going to be able to do other actions, right? So we are just going to go back to what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to uncomment, oh no, my codes. So if you remember, we want on the click of this button, we want to get the value of these two fields, right? So I have a reference to the button. I'm just going to do button.add event listener, right? What do I want to listen to? So if you can see, my VS Code is already giving me options, right? There's abort, animation cancel, aux click before input, right? So I can add an event before a user types his name, right? Block and play, change, click, close, right? But what we want to use is click. So if I put in click, it takes a function as a callback, right? So you don't need to understand what a callback is for now. Just know that this is the syntax. If I go to W3 schools document, you're going to see that this is the syntax to write. So this is the syntax, right? Element.add event listener events. That's the name of the event. In our case, click. Then function, use capture. It's not important for now, right? But it just accepts a function, right? So I put in a function. We all know how to create functions, right? So I can just as easily as do a console.log hello again. So we can see what we just did. So if I go back to my documents, canonical properties of non-reading add event is now button. Okay. So the ID is submit, not button, right? Yeah. So if you watch, if I click on submit button now, why is it refreshing? Button.add event listener. So let me just refresh this. It's reloading the page. Okay. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Okay. I know why. So sometimes. Okay. So if I click on submit now, I'm going to have whatever code I have written inside of here run, right? So this just says, so let me just explain this thing to be a little clearer, right? So button.add an event, right? For me on this button. So whenever it's clicked, run this function, right? So this function can have whatever block of code we want it to run. We can want it to run, we can make it to run a calculation or anything, and it returns a value, right? Before I get to that, I can as well create this function outside, right? Function, button events, blah, blah, blah. Then just come here and just type in, let's say just come here and just type in but, right? This function, right? But before I get to that, let's just get what we want to achieve to work, right? So basically, this is the syntax, right? Element, add event listener, event function, right? So I have button as my element, add event listener. I want to listen on click, then I just console.log hello, right? So we can see hello on the console. So now, if I type in John here and age of 1213, right? For me to be able to access those two values and play around with it, I need to listen on maybe the submit event, right? So if I come in here, I'm just going to take away my console.log. Remember, we already created two variables, right? The first name element and the last name element, right? So again, let's console.log it first, right? I can just do console.log first name and age. Sorry, first name dot value and age dot value. Hope it's value or text content, right? So if I type in John and age of 2005 and click submit, you're going to see that we have received the value of those form fields, right? So remember, we're talking about DOM and how to access every element in an HTML page, right? So we can access this via inner HTML. When it gets to form and form fields, we have to use event listeners and value of a form field, right? So as you can see, I just got the value of John and maybe age. So I can extend this a little bit. I can create a p tag here, or I'll just use what we have above, the output we have, right? So we have a h1 name output, right? So if I get this value, rather than console log it, I can just do document.get element by id output dot inner HTML equals my name is first name and I am age years old, right? So this is just like a practical example of something dynamic, right? So if I go back, reload this and type in John and type in 150 and click on submit, it changes. Okay. First name dot value, sorry, and age dot value, right? So remember, first name is an element and I cannot just output a full HTML element on the page. Then age also is an element. So if I save this time and go John, age 12, if I submit, it's going to change my text to my name is John and I am 12 years old, right? So basically, this is just a combination of DOM forms, manipulating forms, and also using event listeners, right? Event listeners is so huge, right? But I only want to talk about, we can just stay on click event for this week, right? We can do a whole lot of stuff with click events, right? So I just kind of created a little fun, not really much fun, a little dynamic stuff where I can input my name and age and I put it on the page. Before I ask for questions or move to the next topic on my list, I'm just going to go back to this DOM form so we can see how this little program was created, right? We're going to do something like this today. And I have some exercises everyone can just play around with it, right? So there are some functions you're going to have to create and submit. Those will just help you practice all this stuff and maybe how to use them, right? So if you look at this, so please input a number between 1 and 10, right? So this little stuff, I'm very sure it uses it uses a function. Okay, not functions. It uses if statement, right? So if I check this, I am going to see that it's already using if statement, right? So we're going to build programs that uses if statements, loops, functions, and so on and so forth. So if I type in 25, it's going to know that I did not type in a number between 1 to 10 because it's getting the value. Let me see. Okay, so this is exactly what we did, right? Document.get elements by ID, num. And if you can see, num is an input field like we had, and it's getting the value. Okay, so just kind of run some little what's it called, calculation, right? So I don't want to go, we've not talked about ISNAN, so I'm not going to go into this for now. So, but basically, right, DOM helps you manipulate your HTML content, right? Anything in the HTML or on the HTML page, right? Be it forms, be it images. I'm not sure I've kind of played around with images, right? But you can manipulate images and links, change links, change where links goes, and you can create some stuff dynamic with HTML forms and event listeners, right? So for event listeners, I'm just going to go back to the topic. This is the syntax, right? Remember, when we started, I told you everything in every programming language has a syntax, right? For function, we kind of called function syntax, right? Okay, before I go, let me just show you something. So the syntax is elements, add event listener, event. So this can be click. Let me just see. Yeah, this can be click and so many other stuff, right? Waiting, toggle, scroll. I can do on scroll. I can do rect exchange, right? Rate exchange. So, but the most popular one we're going to be using is click. What I want to show you right now is if I take out this function, right? And come down here and remember how we declare our functions, right? Functions submit, right? So this is an external function, right? It doesn't have anything to do with that add event listener. And I add this here. It's still going to work the same way. If I come here, right, John, age of 12, and submit, it's still going to change the context because if you look at the syntax, it just expects a function, right? So what I just did previously is I wrote the function directly on the syntax. So let me not just kind of go over myself and confuse anyone. So this is how you write event listeners. If you understand event listeners, right? I'm sure you can build really, really cool stuff, right? It's even one of these exercises we're going to try to solve today is based on event listeners and getting form fields, right? So I'm just going to take a pause here and going to see if anyone is confused about DOM manipulation and how to kind of access HTML DOM elements. If you have any questions, you can just raise up your hands and we'll take your questions. So no questions, everyone is okay, right?
Mommy, I have a question, please. Manipulation and method, do you use them interchangeably?
Manipulation, what do you mean?
You just mentioned it now, and I'm trying to wrap my head again. You said DOM manipulation, and do you use manipulation and method interchangeably? Like method is the action that you want to perform. Is that what you refer to as manipulation just now?
Yeah, so DOM manipulation is what we've been doing with methods, right? So method just helps you manipulate. So manipulation, DOM, like document object model or DOM manipulation, it's the whole is like the goal, the general term, right? So I want to, manipulating the DOM means changing whatever was on the HTML file or changing the text from JavaScript. but you need those methods, right? So the get element by ID, the inner HTML to be able to change them. So manipulation or manipulating, it's what we want to do. The methods is how or what gives us access to do it.
All right. Okay. I got myself a bit confused. Thanks.
Yeah. So everyone is comfortable with DOM. Ola Daniel.
Yeah, once again, I realized that both the console and the DOM are both being displayed now. Is that what I'm saying?
Both the console and the DOM?
Yeah, this page you have on the screen now, you have your console open and you have the web page open by the side too.
Yeah.
So that means you're putting both the DOM function and the console on the same JavaScript page and both working, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to see, let me see. So do you mean I can, if I open this up and save it, it's going to console log it as well as change or manipulate my DOM, right? But if you're talking about this window, I am the one that's opened this window. I can close it. I just opened it for us to see our console. But if I save this now and maybe put in 12 as age, if I submit it, it's going to manipulate the DOM and also console it to the console. So right, yes, I can do both of them. I can send to the console and I can also change the DOM.
Okay.
Hi, Funke.
Hi, Sammy. Yeah, just a quick question. Can you explain what e.prevent default does?
Okay. So if you had noticed, when I was trying to get this to work, it was just auto-reloading this page for me, right? So if I take this off now and save this, I won't be able to do what we just did, right? So if I do this and I put 12, it's just going to just auto-reload this page, right? So the reason being, this is a form, right? So this is a form element, excuse me, and this button is inside the form element, right? So the way HTML was programmed or the way the browser works, right? So if a button is in a form element, it assumes this button is supposed to submit this form, right? So maybe my form is not looking good. On actual forms, whenever I fill the form and click on submit, the browser automatically picks up this event, right? So the browser already has the same way I created the custom a custom event here. The browser already has an event listening on any button in a form element. And what it does is it automatically tries to submit the form. So if I show you something now, if I put maybe an action, let me say method post and action, I want this to go to https google.com, right? If I try to click on submit now, just observe my URL. If I click on submit, it's going to try to send whatever that is to google.com. But why I wrote e.prevent default, right? So there's an event. So I picked up, this is a little bit complex. It's a default method, right? If you don't want the browser to do this because it's already listening on its own event, you call the command event.prevent default. I don't want the default browser's event listener. I want to use mine, right? So if I do this and save, and no matter how I click on submit, the browser is not going to try to submit this form. So this is just trying to say override the browser default on this form and this button. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So no other person has any questions, both on event listeners and DOM manipulation, right?
I don't have a question, but I just need to take a couple of hours for me to digest what you just said.
Okay, couple of hours in this lesson. Yeah. So again, it's you can always like kind of come back here.
Yeah, because you said play around with it, so it's going to take a couple of hours to play around with it.
Okay, yeah. So you can just play around with it, and I bet if you do this stuff maybe 2, 3, 4 times, maybe 4 days, you're just going to get a little bit familiar with it. Then you'll be just the only thing you need to learn is how to combine them to kind of build little programs, right? So yeah. So I'm just going to go to, we're still going to come back to using events, but I'm just going to go to, yeah, so I've talked a little bit about events, right? Let me just see. I only talked about the click events, but there are a couple of them that does fun stuff. So there's mouse over. So let me just play around with this, right? So, but you can come and just play around with every of the other methods, right? So if I do button.add event listener, mouse over, right? If I change it to mouse over right now, I don't necessarily need to click. What mouse over means is the browser will be waiting for me to kind of move my mouse. Like if it just senses a mouse over this element, it's going to fire the function, right? So what I'm going to do on mouse over, I'm going to change that. Let me see, let me save this code. And so on mouse over, I want to change the elements on that H1 to, hey, you hovered on our submit button, right? So if I save this now, and I don't necessarily need to click, if I just hover over this, okay, it's not even changing back. Let me refresh this. If I just put my mouse over this element, it automatically picks that my mouse is on this element and does whatever action I want to do. So I explained this yesterday, right? So if you've used some blogs or some sites, if you just take your mouse, like maybe you're not interested in the website, you just like kind of move your mouse out and try to close the window, they're going to just pop up a little modal and say like, maybe why are you going, give us your email, stuff like that. So these are all events you can just use and listen to how you communicate with your user, right? There are other ones, they are resize. If you resize the screen, you can fire an event on page resize, right? So, but what you'll be using most of the time is click. Just try to what's it called? Try to just play around with click and see how it works for you. Okay. Let me just look for events reference. Let me see and just give you a link to number, date, Boolean separator now. Events. Okay, abort after print. Yeah. So you can, and the good thing about this page is once you click on it, right? So if I click on mouse up, okay, let me use mouse move, it's going to give me an example on how to kind of use and play around with it, right? So I'm not going to share this reference link. So if you want to maybe play around, let me add it to this list first of all. I'm going to share this later. Then I'm going to share it in the chat. Right? So if you just want to go over the references and see what other events you have. So there's key down. So whenever I start typing, key press, key up, input. Let me see a phone you can use before I move. I want us to do something today. Select. Okay. So yeah, you can just maybe come and just try out some of those methods, right? So I'm just going to see. Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of explain a little bit about developer tools in case some persons doesn't kind of know about the developer tools, right? So JavaScript developer tool, like I said, I think yesterday, it's a tool or a toolbox provided to, or we developers are able to debug codes and just make life a little bit easier for us, right? So first of all, how you access the developer tools is you click on the little three dots on your browser, go to settings, more tools if you're on Chrome, go to more tools and you go to developer tools, okay? So for now, while we are writing JavaScript, the second way to go there is to right click on your browser page and click on inspect from anywhere. But this time you have to click on the console tab. So I'm going to explain a little bit on developer tools while touching on Node, right? So this just kind of provides you with a JavaScript engine where you can type in JavaScript, right? If you remember previously, I was kind of writing JavaScript here. Let x equals 0, x, it's going to output x for me, right? So the console just helps you do some stuff. If you're writing your code and you run any console.log, I said previously, console.log, it's a function it's a function that is provided to us by JavaScript to help debug and see outputs from our code in the console, right? So any console.log you run comes here. You can also write code directly here. I can also console.log and output directly here, and it's going to run. So with these I wanted to say developer tools. With these JavaScript developer tools, you can do the basic two things you're going to be using it to do. If you're not familiar with this, is the Elements tab and the Console tab, right? The Console is for JavaScript. The Elements is for HTML and CSS, right? So let's say you're building a very complex page and you can't figure out why something is not behaving well. You can come here and it will just help you kind of look for and debug stuff, right? So if you can see, as I'm taking my mouse over, okay, let's say I have 100 lines or maybe a very long page. I can just come here, click on this, and I can just click on this and it's going to take me to this element, right? So we are past HTML. I don't want to dwell on this, but the console just helps you debug your code and makes life easier for you. Igito, you have a question? Hello, Ngito.
Okay. Good evening. Just before you move away from the phone, right? When we're working on HTML, I know I tried attempting form on my own first project and all, but there was a part of it that I couldn't really get done. That's retrieving the information on the form to the email. And you said you were going to explain that when we're doing JavaScript. So if we are trying to get this information, I know we can see it display on the console and all, but how do we get it in our email? So like on Salesforce, you have like a web space. How do you do that linking? So whatever information you get from the user, you can receive it at the other end on your email.
Okay, so you're asking how to get these form fields directly sent to your email or something? Are you there, Ngito? I'm just trying to get
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so basically, right, if I do this again, you're going to see that, okay, I've commented it. You're going to see that we are accessing the values of those two form fields in our event listener function, right? So sending that to an email, is an external topic that I cannot even try to delve into right now, right? So it involves API, making an external request. I'm going to have to call a server. The server will handle it and the server will send an email over the network, right? So it's a topic I don't want to go into, but basically, right, with just this, you can see that even if this form has 5 fields, I can access the form fields from here. Then you decide whatever you want to do with the form fields, right? We've not gotten into Ajax and making API calls. I don't know if we'll do that, but what you're asking requires calling or doing what we call an API call, sending the data to the backend, then the backend will send an email. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me just do it. So, are we not going to require something like that? Like if we're going to develop something as similar to web to case because that's about the same system. Or if we start doing Salesforce, would that have another way of getting it done?
Yeah, web to case. Web to case is done automatically, right? So Salesforce automatically does that for you on the server. So we're just learning JavaScript, right? Introduction to programming, the syntax and JavaScript. If I'm going to get to API, sending API calls and server, I don't think we'll even have time to open up servers and how to connect servers to web page. So, but if I'm going to talk on API calls, I'm going to show you how to send this, like let me not commit myself. I'm going to confirm if we're going to deal with servers or I'm sure we're not going to deal with servers, right? Because it's out of scope.
I know it's out of our scope, but I think to really, really be good, if we can even use a tutorial session or one of those sessions to just give us the server lesson, because you've taught us how to use templates to do a regular website and all that stuff. So yeah. I'm just saying that if we have all this knowledge and we're not able to deploy it fully, other than just GitHub, doesn't really make so much sense to me. Just like me being able to set up a form and I can't really deploy it. It doesn't sit well with me. So I'm just saying, even if it's out of the scope, it will really, really be good to just show us, okay, this is, if you want to host a site, this is how you package the files. This is how you upload it on servers. This is how you link your domain name and all that stuff. I think that would be good, even if it's outside of the scope, because there's nothing as good as making the knowledge profitable. Or, I mean, I can't know how to do a website from a template and I can't host it. It doesn't make sense to me. So just try.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. But again, it's out of the scope of the lesson, but I'll just see what I can do, because if I try open up servers, it might take up to 1 week of our time, right? So I'm just going to see what I can do. But to just be clear, it's totally out of our scope, Ngito. Thank you very much. Okay, can we go ahead now, right? So thanks, Ngito.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so what was I talking about? I was talking about the JavaScript console, right? So I'm sure, or I know some of us are already comfortable with the console, but if you're not comfortable with it, the element section is for you to play around with HTML, and the console part is JavaScript, right? So I am just going to go into I'm going to talk about Node, right? So again, I'm not sure if everyone has Node installed on their computer, but I think some persons already have, right? So basically, right, Node or Node.js, if you've maybe read on your own, you might have come across the term. It's just an engine that helps you run JavaScript locally, right? So if I go to my code editor, I don't necessarily most times need the web browser to run this code, right? I can build a program independent of a website, right? I can decide not to attach this, and this is a JavaScript. JavaScript is a programming language, right? I can build a program and just run it directly from my console, right? But to be able to run JavaScript files, you need what we call a runtime engine, right? You need what we call Node.js. I'm going to even tell you something now. The way the browser understands, passes, reads JavaScript, and does all the DOM manipulations for us is through a JavaScript engine, right? On the first day of HTML, I told you that the browser is just a software that has all the required tools to help you display web pages appropriately, right? It has a JavaScript engine. I can do this right here, right? So this is me writing JavaScript. Let's name equals Gito, right? I can do this here because there's a JavaScript engine installed, or this web browser has a JavaScript engine, right? So that is Node. But the name of the JavaScript engine here is V8, but you can install Node on your computer and you'll be able to run JavaScript code just like the browser runs it, right? So right now, if you don't have, let me just do something. Right now, like I can just do function sum, right? Let's say param1 P1, P2, return P1 plus P2, right? Then I'm going to do let's x equals sum 2 and 3. Then console.log x. Okay, so let me just take this up, right? So I just wrote a mini program that adds two numbers. I added two numbers and saved the return value in a variable x, and maybe rather than the normal thing we know, document.getElements by ID or blah, 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 I just console.log it directly, and I removed my JavaScript from the HTML, right? So I can run this program without a web browser, right? Because I have Node installed in my on my computer, right? I can just do node script.js, and if I run it, it's going to give me my result. Okay, let me just put something more descriptive. The output is X, right? So if I run this again, I'm going to see like it runs my program directly in my console without the browser, right? So Node.js, it's a JavaScript environment or runtime environment that helps you run JavaScript code without the browser. I am going to share a resource. I won't want to take everyone through the process of installing Node one after the other on this class. We have just 30 to 40 minutes now. So I'm going to share a link that everyone can use to install Node. Though we're not going to be using it for now, or maybe from next week we'll start building little programs we can run in the console. Okay. So I'm just going to bring this back and bring back our okay. So that's just that for Node.js and Node and JavaScript developer tools, right? So okay, I wanted to do something, right? So we've kind of talked or touched on each and every of the basic stuff like DOM, events, functions, objects, though we just talked about little by little, and we still have other things to talk about, but I wanted to kind of solve one maybe typical use case or exercise on how to combine variables, I think data and math operators and some other stuff. So you see how all these stuffs are used maybe practically to build softwares. Then I'm going to kind of drop this little exercise I created. Nothing hard, just simple stuff we've already learned in the class. So everyone can just attempt it and maybe play around with it or submit the exercise, right? So I have a little text I opened, right? So let me see a fun one, right? I wanted to just solve this in the class, but let me just do this one because we've done something similar to this, right? So let's just try solve this together, right? It's going to enable us. We're going to use functions. We're going to have to create two functions. We're going to get form fields from these two stuff and use DOM manipulation to display the result, right? It's similar to what we just did, but it's going to use functions to run calculations based on input, right? So let's just try it. If you have questions, you can just ask me and I'm going to answer, right? So let me see where is it? So okay, it says write a JavaScript program, right? To calculate multiplication and division of two numbers. Those two numbers are going to be imputed by a user, right? So this is a sample from first number. You can impute any random number, right? Second number, you can impute any random number. Then two buttons, multiply and divide. So whenever you put in two numbers and maybe I put 2 and 5, if I click on multiply, it's going to change the inner text or the inner HTML of this element to the results, right? So I am just going to try, I can do it. I'm just going to do it so everyone can just see practical examples of how, or maybe all these stuff, functions, event listeners are being combined, right? Okay, so let's just kind of get into it. I'm going to go to my HTML and try to simulate the sample. I'm just going to take it off from a form. I'm going to take off the form, so I don't have to do either prevent default. So I'm going to do first number. Right? Second number. Git, are you raising your hands? You have a question? Second number. So if I go to my browser now and see how this looks, I should have something similar to what they have, right? So we are going to put in the two, let me just pin this and bring this here, right? So we're going to put the multiply and divide function, right? So I wanted to give this as one of the tags, but I just figured we should solve it in the class so everyone will understand how to go about the other exercises, right? So I'm going to put button submit, button multiply and divide, right? I'm going to put two of them together. So it should, yeah. So if I go, we have one last section, which is the result section, right? I'm going to put a p tag. The result is going to put in a span and leave it empty for now, right? So if I go, I will have, okay, the result is too big. Oh, I have a style adding font to p tags, right? So I'm just going to take this off. In fact, I'm going to take everything off, right? If I save this, yeah, I should have the result is this. So basically, this is a very, very little calculator. So let me change this to number. I don't want it to be a text field. I want it to be a number field, right? So this is a very big, right? So I still have first name. Let me use first number, second number. Okay, my browser, yeah, doesn't remember again. So this is just like very basic calculator. If we kind of practice all this stuff well enough, we're going to build a real robust calculator. But for now, let's just go over this and see how all these stuffs are being done without just doing one example, right? So again, the requirement says we should write a JavaScript program to calculate multiplication and division of two numbers, right? So if I put in two numbers and click on multiply, it should return the result of its multiplication. If I click on divide, it should divide both of them and return the result, right? So looking at this, we can see based on what we learned from function that we need to create two functions, right? Multiply, divide. It will take two parameters. Each of them will take two parameters and return either the product or the difference, not with difference, or divide the two numbers and return the response, right? And we are still going to need event listeners because when this button is clicked, it needs to maybe get these two values, pass the values into this function and change this element, right? So I'm just going to go into our JavaScript to try to implement that. So you're going to see how maybe a real life software issue is actually solved, right? So first things first, I need the value of, okay, I need to reference all my elements, right? So I need to reference all my elements in JavaScript. Remember, JavaScript can access your HTML elements via the DOM. So I'm just going to go to my JavaScript file and let me say gets all required elements, right? So I'm going to do const first. Okay, I can't start with a variable, a number. First number equals document.get elements by ID. What do I have as the ID? First number, okay? I paste this. Yeah, I'm going to just duplicate this line, right? Second number. So I'm just trying to get the elements, right? Document.getElement by ID, second number, right? Then, okay, I'll change this to multiply the ID and this to divide, okay? So I'll go to my JavaScript, create one more. I'm going to name it multiply button, right? I'm going to save it, get the ID as multiply, then divide button. I'm going to save, get the ID as divide, right? So right now, I've kind of completed the first step, right? Because no matter what I need to do, I need a reference to all these elements. I think I omitted one, right? The span. So I'm going to give this an ID of results or output. Okay. So if I save this, I'm not going to get the last reference I need. I'm going to call it output. Output. So right now, I've gotten all the elements I need. I've gotten a reference to them in JavaScript. So the next thing I need to do is to create these two functions, right? Multiply and divide. So as easy as we did it last time, I'm just going to go and let's say maybe I'll put a comment and say create let's say, yeah, say create required functions, right? So I'm going to say function multiply. I'll need to take two number 1, 2, and just return. Again, remember, we can do anything in function, right? I can save the result in a variable, right? num1 times num2 and return results, right? But I can as well just return num1 times num2 times num2, right? So what this just does is it just returns the value of the product of these two numbers, right? So I'm just going to create the divide function, right? So let me say function divide, right? Same thing, num1, num2. Okay, again, just return num1 divided by num2. Should I switch it? Num2 divided by num1? No, let's just leave it like this. Num1 divided by num2. Okay, so right now we've created our two calculator or our two functions, right? One to multiply, one to divide. If I go back again, we've created these two functions. So the next thing required is to create event listeners, right? So whenever this button is clicked, something happens. Whenever this button is clicked, something happens, right? So I'm just going to go and create event listeners, right? So remember, the two buttons or the two elements we want to add event listeners to are multiply button and divide button, right? So I'm just going to say multiply button. Remember our syntax. Let me take this up. Dot add event listener, right? So this thing on click. Then I append the function, right? Okay. So I'm just going to write for one, then we're going to do for the other one, right? So basically, right, if you look, program that calculates multiplication and division of two numbers, right? Basically, what we want to do, if I click or when I click on multiply, it gets the two values here, passes it to the multiply function, returns the result, and outputs the result here, right? So I want to do, rather than doing it the way I did last time, let me say let's first number value equals first number dot value, right? I know previously I just used this directly, right, and said output document.getElement by ID first number dot value. But right now I want to save it in a variable to make it look cleaner and also use variables, right? Then let second number value equals second number dot value. Okay. Then now let's result. Remember, we want to multiply both of the numbers, right? Equals to our function multiply. So I'm going to call the function. I'm sure everyone is comfortable with everything I'm doing, right? So I'm just declaring variables and returning functions to variables, right? So multiply, num1 is first number value, sorry. Num2 is second number value. So I remember when I was explaining to someone, right? If you can see, I'm doing less of hard coding, right? So basically, I've not even hard coded any string here. If you can see, right? So all these are IDs, right? So these are IDs of the page, right? But in my program, right? So previously, maybe last week, I was doing object. I know the object first name as Sammy, but right now I'm building the program. I don't even know the input that is going to come in by the user from the user, right? So this is just like kind of how you build dynamic programs, right? So you collect the value. I don't know what the first number will be. I don't know what the second number will be, but I know I'll get the first number. I'm very sure I'll get the second number. I'm going to pass it to this function, and the function will calculate it, return a result for me. Then I want to use the result and output it to this output element, right? So to get that, I'm going to do, I already have a reference to the elements. So what I'm just going to do is output dot inner HTML equals results. Okay, so I'm done with multiplication now, right? So if I enter a number, if I enter a number here right now and click on multiply, it's going to output the result as the result is. But before I test, okay, let me just test, right? So if I come here and put in 2, I hope there's no error. I put in 1 and click on multiply. Okay, I have an error. In fact, there's no error. It's not even clicking at all. Let me see why. So the first thing to do, or the easiest thing to do, is to use a console log, right? Console.log hello. Okay. I took out the JavaScript file again. I took out the JavaScript file, so that was why it wasn't working, right? So I know my code works now, so I'm going to take off the console log. And if I put in 2 and put in 1 and click on multiply, it's going to give me the result of multiplying 2 and 1, right? If I put in 2 and 10 and click on multiply, it's going to give me the result of multiplying 2 and 10. Okay, I can play around with this however I want, and it's going to give me the result. But if I click on divide, it's not going to do anything yet because we haven't created that function or that event listener. So basically, right, you can see how I've used 24 lines of code, basically 23, to build a little fun calculator, right? And what I wanted to show, why I wanted to do this is, I know previously when I was doing the examples on maybe variables, objects, arrays, especially for arrays, I knew the length of the array. I said maybe when you're building a program, you might not have all those details, right? You need to programmatically check for all those stuff, right? So right here, I did not have any hard-coded stuff. I didn't know what was going to come in. I don't know the results, right? So I'm just going to quickly do the same thing for division, right? So I'm going to do divide button dot add event listener, click. Okay, I'm going outside. Function, same thing we did. Then I'm just going to copy this, right? Because I don't want to double type because it's the same thing. I just want to get the value of the first number and the value of the second number saved in a variable, right? Then I'm going to do let results equal to this time divide our function, right? So our divide function, divide, what's it called? First number value by second number value. Okay, so I'm going to, after dividing it, I'm going to output it, right? Output.inner HTML equals results. Okay. So if I come back to my page, refresh, okay, it's already refreshed. But if I put in 2 and 10, is going to divide 2. Okay, I thought I interchanged it, so I can do 10 and 2. It's going to give me the result of dividing 10 and 2, right? So basically, right, we've just, though I didn't check for errors in this code, so I can mess this whole up in a lot of ways, but that's not what we want to check right now, right? What we just wanted to check is what, like, we just built a little phone calculator and we used, I think, 3 concepts of what we've learned from last week, right? I used variables, I used return values, I saved the return value of a function to a variable, I used event listeners, and I used DOM manipulation, right? There's another one we can try to attempt that involves arrays, right? But I don't want to go into that because I think I'm going to add it to the exercise list, right? So basically, this is just like a little example of how you build programs and how all these little strings, numbers, data types, and we've not even done like any complex computation. Like I did not even use if statement, right? So my point is, whatever we are learning, the if statement, the loops, you're going to need to know them whenever you want. They are just like building blocks, right? You're going to need to know them whenever you want to build maybe something large or any projects you're asked to build, right? And it's the same with Salesforce, but it's just different syntax, right? Different syntax. So I can share this if any of you want it, so if any of you want to go through it. But later on, I'm going to release some little exercises that you can just play around with, and it will just help you think. And you're going to maybe go around or play around with every of the syntax and concepts we've learned. Okay. So does anyone have any question or need clarity on maybe what we've just done? So everyone understands everything about JavaScript right now, right? Or basically all of what we've talked about, or it's still too much for now?
What you just explained now, Sammy, is very, very, I like it. Like I'm able to fix both together. I'm able to understand it better. So I really appreciate this. So if you don't mind, when you share, I would like you to please share. But this is very, very helpful. Like I learn better this way. I see the question and I know how to apply. So I'm grateful for this solution you provided us now. And hopefully we can have more of such use cases.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we'll have more of this, right? So I'll just try and be solving, or maybe if we talk about a concept, I'll try to use whatever concept we talked about, maybe if it's loops, I'll try to use it to solve a practical example, right? Yeah. Thank you, Omobi.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sammy, this is Ola Daniels. Just like some days ago, that I asked you the question that when you were teaching us CSS and HTML, it came close to home because we could see it on the web and all that.
Yeah.
First time I'm going to appreciate this JavaScript today, like Omobi said. I could see the calculation. I could see how all the functions were used, and I could see how the results came out. So thanks for this.
Okay, no problems. Yeah, any questions? So I guess everyone understood, like maybe kind of got. Okay, hi.
This is Tolex. Thank you for today. So we appreciate if you can give us more of this.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay,
it's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to, I don't know if I should share this codes and this question, But basically, right? Yeah, I think I'll add this. I'm going to add this, even regardless of me solving it here, right? I'm going to add this to whatever I have on this my document, right? Because I'm going to share this document after this class. These are very, very easy ones, but I'm going to add 2 of the complex ones so you could just to help you think and apply what we've learned. Okay. So subsequently, I still have other stuff to talk about because we didn't talk about maths. I skipped some stuff that might be a little bit complex. We didn't talk about maths. I'm looking for maths. Just maths. Yeah. Okay, I think I opened it once, but I didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about random. So you can do some random stuff with JavaScript, right? You can do floor seeding and stuff like that. And especially dates, right? So dates is very important. And I think one of the exercises requires you to learn how to use dates. Then again, very important. I wanted to talk about something yesterday, but I pushed it to today, right? So you're going to do yourself much more. Like you're going to speed up your learning if you understand that you mustn't know you mustn't know everything in this stuff, right? So I wanted to talk about like Googling stuff and maybe using Stack Overflow and stuff like that, right? So maybe if you're learning and you maybe hit a blocker, how do I explain this? Everything you want to do, in fact, this calculator program or this little stuff I just built, if I put in the right keywords in Google, it's going to bring a solution for this, right? So what I'm just trying to say, if you have a blocker or if you have maybe you're learning something, you don't understand a particular term, you can always Google it, right? I think I talked about it in CSS back then. So how to create navigation, right? You see tons, how to create navigation bar in HTML, you see tons of results, right? So we are in JavaScript now, right? So I can do how to, if I use build a calculator, it's going to give me a full-fledged solution on how to build a how do I spell calculator? Sorry, calculator, right? Using JavaScript.
On the search engine, we just bring the first item you see is the W3 School item document. So yeah, you can as well just go through that book and
this is the most popular, it's the most popular and the most easy to use lessons on any little topic, right? I think it's the best for beginners. It's the best for beginners. That's why whatever you search, it's either Free Code Camp comes up or W3 Schools, right? So like I was saying, you always have the solution to everything on Google. What you just need to do or what you just need to know is you need to know how to use keywords. Okay, you need to know how to, by keywords, I mean, let's say you're looking for how to create a function in JavaScript or you need to type in create function. In fact, my English must not be correct, right? Create function JavaScript. Mustn't be how to just put in the 3 keywords you need. Is already bringing W3 Schools for us, right? So in the course of maybe using other programming languages and JavaScript, right? You're going to have to be doing a whole lot of Googling. I still Google stuff till today. HTML and CSS might have been a little bit straightforward, but you're going to just have to be doing a lot of Googling. And all you need to know to be fine is use keywords, right? So use maybe functions or variables or JavaScript and to just bring out a solution to your problem. Okay, so I think I am done for today. I've exhausted all I have my lessons. If you have any questions, you can just ask now so we can take it before we go.
Sorry, are you going to share the code with us?
Yeah, I'm going to take it and drop it in the group now. I'm going to zip these 2 files and drop it. Okay. Yeah, Otman, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, Sam. My question is, how many days does it take you to learn all this?
How many days?
Yeah.
I won't say okay. Huh?
Oh yes. maybe days or weeks?
Okay, yeah, so years can still be calculated in days, right? So I won't kind of put an actual figure or maybe an actual time frame on it, right? It depends on you or it depends on your commitment, right? It depends on the hours you put in to practice it daily, right? So if you put in maybe an hour or two and not really time and commitment, right? So the thing is you can learn anything as long as you just commit to it, right? So it shouldn't take, let's say, let me give a rough estimate. If you give it 1 hour, 2 hours a day, it shouldn't take you 6 to 8 weeks to get comfortable. I didn't say be an expert, right? Because I myself, I'm still learning. It shouldn't take you 6 to 8 weeks to be comfortable with JavaScript syntax as a whole. So it just depends on time and commitment. So I can say 1 month and you might just not like practice for the whole month and expect to get familiar with it, right? So it depends on time and maybe commitments and practice also.
All right, thank you. My last question is, if you want to link the HTML with the JavaScript, you know the single forward slash that you put. If you put the double forward, will it still link?
No, it will not, right? So what is happening here is just the whole linking stuff we've been doing from our HTML, right? If you remember how to use addresses or location, right? So I can do script.js, yeah, and it should work because it's just going to read script.js. I can go one folder up, right? So it's just like linking and addressing. So if you remember how to link in HTML, it's the same thing. So why I did this is just
the dot, you say you can go one folder up. The dot, okay, it means you are going one folder up.
Yeah, dot is back up. Dot is up. But / or dot / is this current folder. So what I'm saying here is in this current folder, look for a script.js file.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
What Osman said is what I just want to reiterate. See, my problem is there's a way you can learn all those things and you can understand it, but my issue is integrating everything together, putting it together, and bringing out something that you just brought out now. That takes much, much, much longer than just learning it as a unit. You can learn it as a unit, practice it as a unit, get it in 3 to 4 days, but knowing what to put together is the issue here.
Yeah. So that's where maybe project, not even the exercises or assignments I'm going to give. So when I say project, it's project Babatope is going to come maybe and give at the end of stuff, right? So how you learn, or maybe the way I kind of broke this down is because I've done this over and over again in actual life projects, right? So maybe how you learn to put all this together, right? So maybe I can as well, I can change the implementation of this using some other different syntax or concept, right? So maybe how you learn how to maybe solve issues like this is by constantly solving exercises like this, right? So I tend to maybe look for a problem, or how I learned. So Babatope gives us a problem, then you go think of the solution, right? So we're going to be, because this is just the second week, right? The first week, I just had to take everyone through individual units, like you said. So like I said yesterday, I'm going to try to be integrating at least one of these kind of solutions into every day. I said I'm going to try because we still have other things to talk about. So the more you work on exercise, and you can just Google, you can just Google JavaScript beginner exercises, right? Exercises. Always looking for my keys, right? And you can see some little, it's always bringing W3 schools, right? Some little exercises you can work on. Let me see. If you click on this, so basic with solutions, right? So you can learn the bite size or the unit size lessons, then look for exercises to do if maybe you've not been given your maybe large project or stuff like that. And again, that's where at the end of all this whole stuff, let me not just go there, right? But projects and exercises will just help you put stuff together. Is that okay, Olakunle?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm going to share this. I'm going to share the codes. Then I'm going to share this file. I think I'm still kind of thinking of how submission is going to be, but I'm just going to wrap it up and send it across, right? But I'm going to send this code in the group chat immediately after this class. So yeah, I think we're done for today. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sammy.